more often than not, when the AAA guy shows up and sees powered by vegetable oil in the back of your car, he's like, ah, you're an idiot. Like, why would you do that? And then here I am towing you. But it's like, well, actually, my transmission just blew up, and that doesn't have anything to do with vegetable oil at all.
And that's more than a dress. It's a Grace Kelly movie.
When I was growing up, my father actually managed a power plant in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I went there when I was a kid, and I saw how all this electricity was produced. And they would switch from all these different fuels, diesel fuel or coal or whatever was cheapest at that hour. And they would actually monitor like the stocks. And they would, throughout the day, they'd switch between all these fuels. And so I kind of understood that electricity just was diesel fuel at some point, and a generator turned it into something that went through the wires. Around 2001, 2002, that winter, I heard that you could run diesel vehicles on vegetable oil. I'd never heard of it before. And so I figured I'd try it out and see if it worked. And I bought a crappy pickup truck, which we named Bonesaw. And I think I paid like $1,500 for that thing. Had a blown motor and had to pull a motor out of a Suburban and get the thing on the road. It was like Frankenstein mobile. And then for the conversion, we had a Rubbermaid trash can in the back of the truck with a piece of wood over the top that had a filter in it. So then that's why I started Grease Not Gas, was to help people achieve that running on vegetable oil and not having to buy fuel if they didn't want to. These boxes on the back of my bus are for filtering the grease. It's basically a giant sock that's in there. Pour the grease in the mouth, goes through the filter, it catches all the french fries and crud that's in there, and then clean grease comes out the bottom. Basically gravity just feeds it into the tank through this tube. Here's the tank. There's two of them because sometimes the process can get kind of slow, especially in the winter, because the grease is so thick it doesn't want to go through here. So we kind of go back and forth. But in the summertime you can just use one. But I haven't changed this filter for probably a year, so we're gonna pull that one out and see what kind of condition it's in and throw this one in there. There's a leaf. So you can see this old filter still has like grease going through the bottom of it. If you look in there, you can see all the crud that we caught. So we want to keep that from going into the motor. In there like that. All right. So you can kind of see the crud layer right about here in this grease. This is from a restaurant, sushi place up the street. So I'm really only going to use probably that much, but this guy will catch all the little impurities. Right about there it starts to get kind of opaque. So that's leftover crud. Bring it back to the restaurant if we don't want it. It gets turned into cat food. So this is where it's coming through the wall, going into the tank. This is just a vent so that as fuel goes into the tank, air can escape, or else it would take forever to fill it up. And this is our fuel gauge. It tells me I got a little bit, maybe like a quarter tank of fuel. But this is a giant tank, so I could probably drive for actually like a month with that amount of fuel, no problem. And then you see a little line right here going back into the tank. That's actually a return line. The diesel motor, if it doesn't burn all the fuel that it needs, it recycles it back to the tank. So you gotta have a return line. Right now we have 100% biodiesel, and then we have a vegetable oil. So we have two different fuel tanks, so we have two different filters, and we can select one or the other. This is vegetable oil going in, this is biodiesel going in. In the winter time we run diesel in there just so it's easier to start up. Try to blend in as much organic fuel as we can, but it's hard to start this bus up on biodiesel in the winter. So vegetable oil, and that's the diesel tank or biodiesel. You can mix those two at any ratio. So like in the summer we try to increase as much biodiesel as possible, and in the winter we have to kind of flush it out and run diesel again. I was on the road in Bonesaw, my old pickup truck, and we bumped into our friends in a band called Piebald, and I went to middle school and high school with those guys. They're some of my best friends, and one of them is actually a mechanic, and Aaron Stewart, he was like, man, we got to do that in our van. We travel the country playing shows, and we run on diesel. They already had a diesel van. And so that was the third vehicle I ever converted, was their van, and me and Aaron worked on it together, and he's been a huge part of Grease Not Gas, helping to spread the word and do conversions. He's done a lot of them. It worked out really well. After the shows at night, we'd do a clinic out in the back parking lot, and Aaron and I would kind of show kids how it worked if they were interested, and usually like 20 to 50 kids, sometimes 100 kids would come out every night, and they'd want to learn all about how it worked. After working with some bands and doing lots of cross-country trips, our friend Ben Fee was working for Snowboarder magazine and pitched the idea of a story where we took pro snowboarders from the West Coast to the East Coast to the US Open in Vermont, and then we'd come back to Oregon afterwards. We got a couple sponsors involved, and we started spreading the message of sustainability through the snowboard community. And from there, we had some pro riders and sponsored riders that started to like read the story or see the movie, and were like, I want to do that. And I kind of thought of it as like, well, these pro snowboarders have fans the way the bands that we worked with had fans, and it's really great to be able to spread the message through their status with these people. So like we converted Pat Moore's truck, and Max Weinberger was a guy on the tour who we did his truck like immediately after the tour. He was just like ready to go. It was funny actually, it was that exact winter that our bus that we used with the bands on the road, it just wasn't rented out. There was no bands that winter that just happened to want to tour, and so we're just kind of like, well, why don't we use it for a grease bus where we'd take people from Portland up to Mount Hood, just because we live here, and we wanted to be able to share that experience with people as far as like getting to the mountain without paying for gas. And so the grease bus kind of was invented out of that. People want to ride it because it's cheap. We just charge $10 round trip, so it's about 4 hours of bus ride for $10. You can't really beat that. And then the mountain wants it because you're bringing busloads of people up to the mountain, and then shops like to partner with it, and we like to partner with the shops because they can help us spread the word to all the snowboarders in the area. And so we're kind of using Portland as a model, and we want to spread to Seattle, Seattle to Summit, and LA to Bear, and maybe Denver to Copper. We're just kind of like seeing what happens at this point. I've gone across country 17 times on vegetable oil. A lot of them were with Piebald or with a band, and it was just hauling across country to get to a show in Florida or whatever. And those were like, yeah, more like 99.99%, where start up on diesel for just a minute or two, keep a full tank of diesel for an entire, 20,000 mile tour. We dispose of 4 billion gallons of vegetable oil every year in the United States, so it's not that hard to find. There's about 25,000 people that run their cars on vegetable oil, maybe 30 in the United States, and so it's like there's plenty of fuel for everybody. You can usually find a lot of grease all at once, and you want to be able to take as much as you can. So if you have a 100-gallon tank, it's like, oh, I'm going to take all of this, and then you can drive halfway across the country. Like sometimes they think that you're with the inspection board and that you're like testing their grease or something. I've had that happen. And you're like, no, I use it as fuel. And once they smell your exhaust, they're usually like, oh, really? Okay, I get it. And then that usually is a nice icebreaker that makes it easier to have somebody actually give you the fuel. There are those situations where you're like, I can't find biodiesel, I can't find grease, and of course you can always run the diesel motor on diesel fuel. So you still have that startup tank. It's usually your standard tank, and you can just fill that up with regular diesel just like you normally would. It's just that you don't switch it to vegetable oil while you're driving. For a while there I was like, yeah, I'm going to convert people's cars and that'll be my business, and it's really fun. I like doing it, I like helping people with it. But over the years I found that I didn't really love being just a full-time mechanic, and working on other people's cars can be fishy because they start to like call you when they have a flat tire, and they're like, what? Why'd you do that? Yeah, I have a flat tire. And it's like, doesn't have anything to do with the vegetable oil. And so I started like, yeah, it's a little bit of an investment of time and of trying to work with people. So I started to be a little more selective about the customers I worked with, people that were like, they really want to learn how it works. And so I would really hands-on show them. Whereas some places you would go and they'd be like, yeah, drop your vehicle off, pick it up on Monday, it'll be ready. And you don't know anything about it. So I wanted to do something that was more like, no, you're going to convert this with me, and you're gonna be like cutting lines and tightening up hose clamps, and I'm gonna show you how to do it. And I think that was, I think it's a lot more important for somebody to understand every aspect of the system rather than just pay a bunch of money to have it work. It's not that magical of a thing. You need to understand what's happening under the hood so that you can operate smoothly while you're out driving on the road, or even just driving to work. Like, you gotta know what's going on under there.